This is Dave the Gardener on Actual Radio.
Hello and welcome again, and you know what, I hope you've all enjoyed this winter break, because now we're going to talk about gardening in March. Well, February has been such a crazy month. You know what, normally February, coldest month of the year. Well, I think February this year will go down as a record month. So crazy, the weather's been hot, and what has it done to the garden? Well, of course, it's given the garden a false sense that spring has already arrived. And if you walk around your garden, you'll probably see everything is sprouting like mad. Even the birds think it's spring. They're flying around looking to nest, and it's far too early for them. So what do? Well, you need to do some work. That's what we need to do. March is a good month, but it can also be a very vicious month, so we've got to be careful what we do. First things I would suggest doing in March is a little bit of pruning. Pruning is something you need to do with the roses. Roses, you know, and you'll probably, when you go and look at your roses, you'll notice there's lots of growth. Don't worry about that. You normally get that every year. The main thing to do, whether they're floribundas or hybrid teas, is to give them a really good prune back now. So you need to keep them back at least half their size. Make sure it's an outward facing bud, and they're really strong buds, not sort of weakish type of buds, but they've got to be nice and strong. And then cut them back with a very sharp pair of secateurs. Then once that's done, always give them a feed. You know, March is a good time for feeding plants, but always use something like a proper rose fertilizer, simply because the rose fertilizer carries all the right nutriments, so it will make a nice steady growth and give you that lovely first flush in June. Some of the other things which you can prune, you know what, loads of people love the plants like the butterfly bush, the buddleias, which grows like mad, flowers through the summer, loads of butterflies on them, and they're great. But of course they grow very quickly, and they can grow 6 foot in one season. So now's the time to really go mad on those. And you know what, you go around people's gardens that haven't pruned them, and you see them in their gardens 15 to 20 foot tall. That's no good. You can't see the butterflies. You have to go upstairs, look out the window to look at them. So the main thing is cut them really hard. You can take at least 3/4 of their growth away, and don't be afraid to do it, because that will give you a lovely bush just about the height for your fence, where you can enjoy all the flowers and all the lovely butterflies. The other plants what you can prune this time of the year is the Daffodils. Used to be very popular years ago, still quite popular. It's a beautiful shrub, flowers all summer, comes in 2 or 3 different colours now, but it gives it that lovely bright pink or pinky white flower right from June right through the autumn time. But it is vigorous, so that needs a real good hard cut back at this time of the year, otherwise it will grow too fast. Now March, as I said, can be a lovely month, but also it can be a frosty month. And you know what this weather does to people? When it's nice and mild, they get in the mood, they want to fly down to their garden centre or nursery, buy all these lush looking plants and get them into the garden. Not a good idea, to be honest. If you think you've got the mood that you want to go and plant out a few pots and things like that, I'll give you a little tip. If you're going down to the garden centre, I never buy any plants which are in a greenhouse this time of the year. I only buy plants which are standing outside, because if they've been outside, they would hardened off. And just buy plants which look nice and firm, not plants which have got loads of growth. Sometimes people don't quite understand, but they see plants coming into flower and they think they look lovely. Look at the label, because some of these plants, because they've been in a greenhouse, will maybe a month advanced to what they should be. So when you put them in the garden, the first bit of frost may well cut them back. But you know, there are other things out there to do. The spring bulbs. Spring is probably one of my favourite times of the year, and the spring bulbs, because are well up now. The daffodils are flowering, snowdrops will soon be finishing shortly, but then you've got all the daffodils, all the hyacinths, crocus. It looks absolutely lovely. Now, one of the questions I often get asked is, What do you do when your daffodils start fading and they start going down? The most important thing to do with daffodils, if you want them to come back year in, year out, is first, when the flowers begin to fade, all you need to do is just cut off the flower heads. Do not touch the foliage. Let the foliage die down on its own, and I guarantee you every year you will get beautiful daffodils without a doubt. The people what either tie a knot in them, like some people do, to get the foliage looking tidy, or cut the leaves off, usually find that they've actually got blind daffodils, simply because you haven't given enough time for the goodness to go back to the bulb. So just remember that. Just take the flower off the old flowers and let it die back naturally. If you've got winter heathers, and I do love them, they lost their popularity a little bit, but winter heathers, the ericas, flower through this time of the year. When they finish flowering, just get the pair of shears and just lightly trim off all the old dead flowers, tidy it up, and you'll get lots of new growth come on them. The big issue, of course, now it's nice and mild, of course, is not only the wildlife wakes up, all the slugs and snails tend to wake up. And this is your biggest enemy in the garden, because you've got all this lush growth coming up. And the one thing about slugs and snails, they tend to be able to climb up flower pots and get into the pot and eat all that fresh growth. One of my favourite plants, hostas, they love them. They just love chewing them up. So this time of the year, it would be an advantage to put some slug pellets around, but always use organic slug pellets. These are safe for our wildlife and pets, and all they do is just dehydrate the slug and snail, so they lay there and die off in the daytime. And that's important because that's pretty safe. Also, one thing I would also say comes out this time of the year is black fly and green fly. Normally attack roses because of all that new growth. You can get some very, very good insecticides on the market now. But what I would suggest doing when you're spraying in the garden, always do it late evening when all the beneficial insects have gone to sleep. And it still works quite well. And also, if you want to split up some of those big clumps of perennials in your garden, what you should have done in the autumn, but you didn't, things like hostas, dahlias, they can do it now. Your last chance. Do it now, split them up, and you'll be fine. And of course, people often say they still grow veg, so I'll mention the veg garden. If the ground's not too wet, you can plant onion sets, broad beans, early potatoes, and of course, if you're lucky enough to have a greenhouse, you can start off your tomato plants. And some of the bedding plant seedlings or corms what need a long season. These are things like begonias and geraniums which need a long, long season. But you know what? It's easier to go to your garden centre and buy a punnet of seedlings. They've done the job for you. You can buy them quite cheap. You don't need all that heat. You save yourself money. So all you got to do is prick out those seedlings and pot them up. You don't have to worry about heating the whole lot to try and get the seed to germinate. So it's an excellent thing to do. And if you've got a greenhouse and it's warm, open those windows. Don't let the humidity build up. That causes diseases. So that should give you enough to go on with now, and hopefully I'll see you here next month. Cheerio.
Email your gardening questions to Dave the Gardener at actualradio.com.